Hi everybody, it's John here. I just thought I'd have a look at seeing if I could show you a way that you could use Avid Media Composer Media to edit in Final Cut Pro 10. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, in my case, I use Avid most of the time, and it's really very difficult to get people to use Final Cut Pro 10. Not because they don't think it's any good, it's just that it's just the way things are done. People use Avid and people see no reason to change. So I started to think, well, what about if I could go into a project from the ground up that's already been ingested into Avid and edit it in Final Cut Pro, or even just log it in Final Cut Pro, or various things really, and then at the end of it, get it back into Avid, and nobody would be the wiser. So the idea would be that you'd turn up for the first day on your job, and you'd be at your Avid, and you would have already ingested Avid Media. And I thought it might be worth, just for the benefit of Final Cut users who maybe don't use Avid, just having a quick look at how Avid stores its media. This is imported media. This is the way that Avid always did right from the beginning in the 1980s. It imported its own media. It always made new media when you imported it. There are other ways on Media Composer to link to media. It's not robust. It relies on the drivers of the camera companies. It's a kind of add-on really to try and bring the application up to date. But really, any serious documentary or any serious program that you're cutting on this thing, you really want to be importing the media. And so when you import something, it makes a folder at the root of the drive that you choose to put your media on. So if I look at this clip here, and I reveal that file in the browser like that, I get a window there, and you can see down the bottom here, it's in the root of the drive, which is my Pegasus, Avid Media files, in a folder called MXF, and it's in a folder called number 1. You can have many numbers of folders after the MXF folder. I think 5,000 files is the limit. So basically, when it's put 5,000 files in there, it will make another folder. Now the files on Avid are stored as MXFs, but they're not MXFs that you get when you shoot things, which are OP1A. They are OP Atom MXFs, which means that you get a separate file for every component. So there's the vision. You can see there 1.82 gigabytes. And here are the audio legs. And if there's 8 tracks, then there's going to be 8 of those. And there's going to be 9 files in total, as there are there. And that's how it works. Now, Final Cut Pro 10 will import these files. You can just point Final Cut Pro at these MXFs and it will bring them in and it will play them. But the problem with this is that you're going to have to join them up somehow, and the audio and the vision are going to be separate. And another slight complication is that they might not be called anything meaningful. And as you can see as you go through this, quite often the files are just gibberish hexadecimal names or whatever the metadata happens to be. You can rename them in a bin, but it doesn't rename the file. So if you've got a sensible name in your bin, but then if you were to bring these straight into Final Cut Pro at Finder level, you'd have to marry the two up, and you would have a problem with the clip name. So I'm going to show a way of doing this, which retains the clip name that you've got in the bin in the Avid, and saves you having to marry the stuff up. Just another bit of background information that is important for Final Cut Pro users, I think, really, when we're trying to get some sort of better workflows for collaboration, is to just point out some of the strengths of Avid's Media Composer when it comes to this. These are clips. These are bins here. So I've got a bin called Lewis Block. I've got a bin called Salvage. I've got Frame. They're just folders, effectively, just like in Final Cut Pro 7. And these are master clips. So you double click a clip and you get it in the source viewer. There it is. And so on. And you can there's various views here. You can view them as script view, you can view them as icons, and you can resize. There's three general basic views. Now these master clips are what are called clone clips. Now this is quite important because this is something that Final Cut Pro doesn't have, because with Final Cut Pro you have your own clips and you can collaborate with each other and you can pass projects backwards and forwards and compound clips, multicams, all the rest of it. But the clips, the actual building blocks of these compound clips and multicams and projects that you create are your own. And up until now, there's been no way of merging that metadata. So if somebody changes the metadata on one clip and you collaborate with them, then there's no way of having a kind of evolving metadata workflow. Now on Avid, it's always been the case that the clips that you see in the bins are master clips that point to the hidden reference clips. And I'll just prove that to you. If I make a sequence here, just take a bit of that, edit it down to the timeline, choose a bin to put it in like that. I've got a sequence here, just call that test, go to the end of it, get another clip, edit that on, so on. So now let's have a third one on the end. Let's put a third one, so there's another one. In fact, let's have one from a different, some syncs there. That looks quite good. A bit of that. So we put that. Okay, so we've got 3 clips there, and they are all in that thing called test. So the nice thing about Avid is that that sequence is made up of clips from here, but you don't see them in this bin. But they are there, because if you say to it, I set bin display, and you say show me the reference clips, you then see the same clips as are over here, which are these here. If you can see them now, you can see these clips. Okay, those are the 3 clips, that the elements that make up that test. And the nice thing about it is that if I was to change the name of one of these clips, say I just call it something like my initials, then the reference clip changes. There it is. And it also changes in the sequence. You can see there, it's changed it. I'll just undo that. And it doesn't undo. Now this is really, really useful, because it means that if you take a bin of clips away and you change things and bring them back, they will update the clips that are already there by virtue of the fact that they will fight it out by modified date and time. And just another thing to prove this, I mean, normally you would have this turned off. So another thing to prove this is if you were to go, I'll just turn that off for now. You don't see it. Now if I made another bin and I option drag that clip into that bin, that is basically a clone of that. And that in turn is a clone, and they're all pointing to the hidden reference clips. Okay, so if I rename that clip, it renames it there, and if I was to look at the reference clips, it's renamed it there too. So this to me is absolutely fundamental to any kind of system where you've got metadata that could be changing, is that you certainly need the ability to be able to update each other's clips. So that's just a bit of a sort of lesson on one of the many strengths of Avid. It's robust media management, and that's why collaboration is very powerful with Avid, because it's very, very easy to take a bin away and collaborate with others, because really all I need to take away is that bin. That bin there with those sequences in has got everything I need in it. I can just save that tiny little file and take it away, and as long as I've got the media, it will find it. An interesting thing about the media is that the media always lives in the root of the drive in that Avid Media Files folder. So as you can see here, it's in that folder, Avid Media Files, MXF. There's various folders within there. They can be called anything you want. It defaults to calling them numbers if you don't do anything. And that's where all your media is. And basically when you fire up your Avid, it goes and loads all the databases that are in all these folders. So every folder has a database, has 2 databases in it, which you'll see there. PMR, MDB, Persistent Media Record, Media Database. They get loaded into memory when you fire up the machine on any attached storage. It has to be in that place. It doesn't matter. You don't need to have things called the same thing. You can collaborate. As long as you've got a copy of the media, it will find the stuff. No relinking. Really, really robust system. So there you are. There's a kind of background into Avid's strengths, which, you know, has to be said. It's one thing they really did get right from the very beginning. Okay, so to the job in hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to export some clips from here into Final Cut Pro 10. And the whole point is going to be that we're not going to copy any media. So we're going to use QuickTime Reference files to do this. Now, one thing before we do this, that obviously at the end of the process, we're going to want to do some relinking to bring things back into Avid. And one of the ways to do the relinking is to have a tape name. As you can see in this bin here, we've got tape names, these are XD-CAM discs actually. Okay. Now, sadly, the tape name, when you export a QuickTime reference, does not travel with the QuickTime file. So you can't round trip the tape name, which means that somebody needs to write something to get this to happen, because it would make life a lot easier. So what you really need to be doing here before you export anything is make sure everything has a tape name. So I've kind of I've made bins in this case that are discs effectively. So that bin is a whole disc. In the old days, it would have been a whole tape. There's another disc, and so on. Now, if the stuff, sometimes file-based stuff, quite often won't have a tape name, it just won't. These have been brought in from disk because they've got this workflow where they back things up to disk first and then bring them in. Now, if it doesn't have a tape name already, then you're going to need to give it one. So I suggest that you give things a tape name before you even start to do the export, and that will make life a whole lot easier at the other end. So basically, highlight the clips, you go to the clip menu, go to modify clip, and then you click here and you say set source, and I want that to be 43986. Now they already are, but I'm going to make sure that they're all that. Okay, 43986. Now make sure it's the right thing. XDS 43986. Click yes. Change tape name to that. Now it'll complain about this. Are you sure? Yes. And then it'll still complain about auxiliary timecode. Just say yes, and there you go. They're all the same. Okay, they're all called the same thing. Okay, so we have got a bin for every disk or every S/S card or whatever you wanted. We've isolated the clips so that a bin contains the same stuff from the same source, and that will make it a lot easier when we bring the stuff back in later on. As I say, unfortunately at the moment the tape number is used, or the tape name is used to relink, and that doesn't seem to round trip. And even if you add it in Final Cut, it doesn't then come back into the Avid. So that is something that, you know, must be fairly straightforward to sort out, I would think. But at the moment it's a bit of a manual process. Anyway, so there we've got a bin of the salvage material. So we select everything in the bin. So that's just Command A to select everything. Go to the export menu and go output, export to file, and in the options we say that we want to export a QuickTime reference file, which is that. All this is selectable, but I would just have everything deselected. No media is being, it's just literally making a pointer that will point to those files that I showed you earlier that are in the Avid Media Files folder. Okay, so we click that and we click save, and then we think, well, where do we want to save that? Well, I've made some folders already for each disk or each card, if you like, just to keep things in order. So I'm going to put that in there like that, hit the button, and you can see it's making these QuickTime reference files. Reasonably quick. I mean, there's a few clips in there. That's it. Okay, now these are tiny little pointer files that are pointing to that Avid Media. So now then, if I now go into Final Cut Pro 10, yep, and we've got these QuickTime reference files that we're just going to import into the correct events. Now, that was the one that I just exported. You would do the same for all of them, but there's the one. So I'm going to import these QuickTime reference files into that event. So here we go. Open up the dialog. I've made a little shortcut to where this media is. Those are the 4 folders that I made earlier. There are the files. Now these are QuickTime Reference files, okay? And you can see. So if I grab that, just leave files in face. It doesn't really matter. No media is moving. This is Avid Media, all on the same system, okay? So we import those like that. Processing files, there they are. So you can see it's doing its thing, and we have got an interlace problem. Now that can be sorted out. I suspect that's because things are not set. There is no flag set on the actual files when they come through the QuickTime Reference file. So we can fix that by going into here, highlight all the clips and saying upper first, and that should now fix that. There we are. Okay, so you've now not got that problem anymore. Okay, so that's it. That's the stuff in there. So you would do exactly the same for all the other clips. Really, so that's the stuff into Final Cut. So just to recap, I've taken some existing media from the Avid, from Media Composer, which is ingested already, input. It exists in Avid as Avid Media files, which are OP Atom MXFs. I've highlighted them in a bin, having given them a real number first, or a tape name first rather, and I have brought them in, and then I have exported them as QuickTime Reference files. The QuickTime Reference file then appears in Final Cut Pro 10 and gives you what looks to be a QuickTime movie with all the relevant audio, and also you can see here that you've actually got the clip names as they appeared in the Avid bin. So you can now edit away with this stuff. No media has moved. It's pretty quick because it's just making these tiny wee files. If I was to look at that file and reveal that file in the Finder, it takes me there, and you can see that that's a 55 kilobyte file. It's not got a symlink on it because it's a QuickTime Reference file. So as far as Final Cut is concerned, and I'm no expert on this, but I think it thinks that that is a full-blown movie file. But within that file, there are pointers that then point to the original Avid Media. Now you might be wondering, why would you not import this stuff directly into Final Cut? Well, you could do that. You absolutely could do that. But if you were then wanting to bring it back into Avid, you would have a relinking problem, I suspect. This way, no media changes hands, and you should be able to bring it back, which I'll show you in part 2. You should be able to cut yourself a nice sequence or a nice project sequence in Avid, export it out of Final Cut via Resolve, bring it back into Avid and relink it. And I'll show you how to do all that in part 2. But the key to this is to use the Avid Media if that's what you're going to do. Clearly, if you're not going to do that, then you would probably just go back to the original cards and go nowhere near Avid in the first place. But if you want to go back to Avid, the best thing to do is to start off there in the first place, is my advice. It's unfortunate about the tape name, but you'll see that is crucial later on, because that's what we use to relink the media.